My name is Justin McLeod, and I'm your host for a new podcast series called Back to the Basics. This show highlights the stories of resilient founders, investors, and operators in tech. These trailblazers paved their own path in the startup world in a non-traditional way.
You all see Serena Williams going out right now. Serena Williams is a brand. She's very conscientious on her exit strategy. So that's another thing that I don't think a lot of founders consider is what's your exit strategy here? Everyone's trying to start, but how is this going to end?
Less than 2% of venture capital dollars are invested in startups led by women and people of color. Mandela SH Dixon is the former CEO of All Raise, an organization that amplifies female founders and funders. Mandela has committed her career to disrupting the status quo by making venture capital more accessible. On this episode, Mandela shares her story on how she helped over 650 underrepresented startup founders raise over $130 million in venture capital. And with that, let's dive in. Did you always have that entrepreneurial bug, like as a kid or like as a person in high school or college, or like what sparked you to start your first company? I think it's called Demo Lesson.
Yeah. Yes. Well, thank you so much for having me, Justin and Crystal and your entire community. I'm so honored to be here. I know I've been following your journey for a few years as well, and I'm really inspired by the impact you're having on bridging the gap of access to people who don't have it and learning the skill set of tech entrepreneurship. So really, really proud of everybody who's on the call. Yes. So to answer your question about did I always have the entrepreneurial bug? No, is the answer. I didn't know anything about business entrepreneurship growing up. I was actually an athlete. So where I spent my time outside of school was on the soccer field, baseball field, softball field, swimming pool, tap lessons, gymnastics, I may have mentioned, cheerleading. I was really involved in physical activities. And it wasn't until after college, actually, that I was ever introduced to the idea of entrepreneurship or starting a business. And it came via the form of a hackathon. I don't know if anyone's ever heard of Startup Weekend, but it's the largest hackathon organization in the world. On a Friday night, you can show up at a venue and just with an idea, any idea. And the other people who are in attendance, they may have ideas as well, or they may have skill sets that are valuable to helping you get your idea off the ground, like business skill sets, finance skill sets, tech skill sets, network skill sets. And I went to that event. I pitched an idea that I had when I was still a teacher, and I formed a team with strangers. Over the next 54 hours, we built a prototype, we pitched it to investors, and we won first place. And so that was my introduction to entrepreneurship. I had no idea. And you might ask, well, what brought you to the hackathon? And it was a boyfriend. Like that was literally, we're not together. He's long gone out of my life. I wish him well, but I will always forever thank him for bringing me to the space I didn't even know existed. So I'm trying to remember how old I was. I think I was maybe 25 at the time. And that's when I first met entrepreneurship. Yeah. So both of my parents are social activists. My name is Mandela after Nelson Mandela. So that was the world that I lived in, was social activism and sports. And then I bumped into entrepreneurship in my young adulthood.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I think I read that you were an educator before you started a startup. So like how have you kind of tie that, I guess specifically kind of just jumping into your first startup and jumping into that entrepreneurial path? Like how did you tie that passion for education and adding that to your first startup?
Yeah, well, I think two ways. One is that the first business I built was focused on solving a problem in the education sector. So like you start with what you know, you scratch your own itch. So when I actually decided to leave my teaching position and I was entering a PhD program en route to becoming a professor, I was charged by the principal with hiring my replacement. So it was the first time I was on the other side of the table being charged of hiring an employee, because I had just been an employee of a school before. And so when I was going through the process of trying to sort through resumes, I was like, how am I supposed to pick a good teacher off of a resume? Like, what about like where they went to school or what their grades were will tell me if they're a good communicator, a good motivator, a good translator of information and inspiration, which is what good teachers are. And so it was impossible. So I said, I need to see them teach, right? Teaching is a demonstrative skill. You have to see people in action to know if they're good at it. And
Right.
so I created a platform that for the first time created a digital portfolio for teachers that, yes, included a resume, but also included video recordings of them teaching. And what that's called is a demo lesson. So that was the name of my first company, Demo Lesson. And the second way I applied my teaching skills was that teaching is sales. You literally, whatever subject area you're in, you have to articulate the excitement of it and get people enrolled who are children or maybe young adults or even adult learners behind what you're saying. So I was an English teacher. I was an English as a second language teacher. I was a history, ancient civilization teacher, computer teacher. Also, I was a soccer coach. But let's
Right.
just stick with English. In English, teaching sixth grade English, I was teaching where to put a comma in a sentence, a semicolon, right? The arc of a story, right? Things that may not be very interesting on the surface, but I needed to be the number one saleswoman in the world for that
Right.
subject in order to enroll my students in it. And so I didn't know it at the time and I wasn't conscious about it. But one of the biggest skills I leveraged from being a teacher is my ability to sell, to get people excited about an idea.
That's awesome. So that's awesome. So as far as like using that, leveraging that experience of being a teacher, also, with that skill set of selling, also with your, background in just being an athlete, because, myself was an athlete as well. And
Oh, what sports did you do? Or
I played
sport?
football. I played football. I played football and basketball in high school, but then I played football in college. I played cornerback in college. So a
I
lot of
did
people don't
not
know
know
that. So that's a
that
fun
about
fact.
you, Justin.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I played in college, but as athletes, athlete to athlete, we know like of that, like that grind, that hustle, and that perseverance. And when things get tough, so like, could you tell me about like your experience, in Silicon Valley, like with your first startup, about like just raising capital? Like that was like, a little over 10 years ago. Like, of course,
Yes, it
then
was.
it's totally different than now. I mean, now we still need a lot of work, but how was that experience when like kind of like going out to raise your first few money
Yes, it was. So like I really appreciate the context that you're setting. Silicon Valley or the tech industry or venture capital industry just 10 years ago was drastically different from what it is today.
right.
Specifically for underrepresented groups such as myself who didn't know about this world, didn't know people in this world, and trying to break in and navigate it. There were no communities like this. There was no cohort programs. At the time, there was one accelerator focused on people of color, specifically Black and Latinx, and that was New Me
Yeah.
Accelerator.
Yeah.
I don't know which news station, maybe it was CNN or one of them did actually a documentary on the work and the movement in 2012 for the first time. Like this is 2012. We're not talking about the civil rights movement of
Right.
1950, 40. This is 2012. And
Right.
this place is completely uncharted for most Black and Brown people and people of other diverse identities. And so this is groundbreaking, but I didn't know that. I didn't know that. I'm coming in wide-eyed, bushy-tailed. I didn't realize I was amongst the first. I had no idea because as you all know, when you're building a business, you got time to do a million other things. No, you are trying to build your business. You are trying to make it work. And you're not necessarily looking out to see what else is going on. And so obviously I knew by the optics, I'm one of a few women. I'm one of a few Black women, right? And so is my partner. He is Black and Mexican. And so we were different. We were in the Imagine K-12 Accelerator, which was the Y Combinator spinoff, ed tech. So we had Paul Graham, Jeff Ralston, all the same investors, but it was their first time building a new accelerator focused on education. I was amongst their, I think I was their first Black woman founder ever. But again, I didn't know that. And so I didn't, I had I guess the bliss of ignorance and not knowing the weight of like history that I'm making. I'm just trying to figure it out like everybody else.
Right.
But it was extremely hard. So contextualizing it, I was in LA at the time. And this is really important because depending on where you are in the country and the world, that also impacts your access to capital. And so in LA, I was building an education company in a space where every investor invests in media and gaming. So it was a mismatch. And
Right.
so when I did the hackathon and I started to understand the industry and where the money for education companies are, it was in the Bay Area. And
Mhm.
so I ended up participating in another startup weekend. And this is really a good lesson for everybody.
Mhm.
Even if you are so one of I think the biggest, hindsight's 2020, but when I look back at my career, I'm like, why did I make it and why am I at this level where so many people I started with aren't? And I
Mhm.
think one of the big things I've done is I kept showing up. Like even as I just kept showing up and being in proximity to someone I can bump into that can help me,
Mhm.
right? And so I showed up again at a startup weekend event a year later, and that's where I met my first investor, Mitch Kapor, who
Mhm.
actually was one of the biggest funders of that New Me Accelerator.
Right.
So Mitch Kapor and his wife, Dr. Frida Kapor Klein, they have a venture firm called Kapor Capital, and I was in their 2012 portfolio where they wrote me my first check. And this is the secret about fundraising. Once you get your first check, it makes it much easier to get all your other checks. The first one's
Mhm.
the hardest. And even the first one from, let's say, a notable investor is
Right.
even better. So I'll pause there and see where you want to take the conversation.
Well, that was first of all, there's a lot of gems in there that like, I think that probably went over some people's head, but just like I think then like you said, just the proximity aspect, and then that's one thing that I don't know if COVID or COVID-19 or the pandemic has like shifted, that in a sense of just a little bit, but it's still like, you know, having that advantage of being close to people, I think is good. And then that's also like a negative for people on the call is like making sure you, like you said, show up and be on the scene. I remember when I built my first startup, we had like this operation, we called it BOTS. So it was an acronym for be on the scene, right? It was
There you
like
go.
be on the scene so we can know
Yeah.
that everybody can see us and we know they know us and they can ask like, who are you guys? Like we see you all the time. And I think
Yes.
that is like leveraging, that network. So and you talk about like funders and getting your first check, and that's kind of a leverage point to kind of get some more capital. But tell me about that experience when you kind of actually started working for is it K4?
K4 Capital. Yeah.
K4 Capital. Yeah. So how did
Capital.
you get to so how did you, from founder to funder? It became a
Yeah.
first investor, but now you had, started to work with them.
I know, I know. I'm going to answer that question. One thing I want to call out because we are in such a, digital age, especially that the pandemic has expedited how we are in relationship with each other. You don't have to be in physical spaces. I
Right.
really want people to know that even though I was making myself in a physical space, because that's the world we were living in at the time, now that there's Zoom and it's so normalized, like keep showing up, make yourself known, like even in a digital space. I don't want people to feel like, oh, she's not talking to me because I can't just get up on an airplane and go to the Bay Area. Like there's a
Right.
lot of events that you can show up digitally where you can still make yourself known, right?
Yeah.
And I think I want to tell everybody real quick, start with your avatar on Zoom, right? Right now, I see a bunch of names. I don't see any photos. Right. I want you after this call to add your photo so that even if your video is off, I now know who Mary Rose is. I now know who Shanice Williams is, right? Make yourself known. Okay, now off my tangent. Question was about how I went to work at K-Port Capital. So I was in their portfolio. They invested in me as a founder. 3 years later, 2 or 3 years later, I shut down my company. We can get into that conversation too, because that's actually the outcome for most companies, right? So you have to understand the game that you're playing.
Mhm.
And then I actually worked at Startup Weekend. This is really important to understand. So remember that hackathon I told you that introduced me to entrepreneurship? They
Mhm.
recruited me to be their global director of Startup Weekend Education after I shut down my company. And so I actually worked for them because I was a bit of a Cinderella story, where I
Mhm.
was a teacher who attended their event, built a company, got money from Silicon Valley investors. Now, Mandela, go do that around the world. Right,
Right.
with my
Right.
charter. And so when that company sold to Techstars, and if you don't know what Techstars is, it's the second largest accelerator, or actually, no, I think it's the largest accelerator in the world, but it's comparable to Y Combinator, which is arguably the most successful accelerator in the world. So I decided not to go with Techstars when they purchased the company. And I actually thought about starting a new business then. I still had the entrepreneurial bug after I got a little sample. And I said, you know what, I
Right.
need to get, I licked my wounds from from my first failure. I felt stronger. I said, all right, let's give this another go.
Mhm.
And before I actually went full time, because I was dabbling in a company,
Mhm.
I got tapped by Mitch and Frida to come work with them and build out their portfolio services. So the way venture capital works is that there's two parts of it. One is getting the money. The second thing is doing positive things with the money that help your business grow. And so I was on the second half of that transaction, where once the founders were invested in, I helped them build their businesses. And a core focus was diversity, equity, and inclusion for me, because really it was a pivotal time for these baby companies who are one person, two people, five people, who are getting their first round of institutional capital. And they're trying to build out their team, their culture that's really going to set the foundation for the future, to make sure it's equitable, to make sure it's diverse and inclusive.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And then, so I know you said that you had that sample of entrepreneur. I feel like once you're an entrepreneur, like always entrepreneur, like it
I
doesn't
know
stop.
you can't, what's been seen cannot be unseen.
Right. You have to like keep going one way or another. You're gonna whip up a new idea, product, service, something. But so what sparked the vision for Founder Gym? Because that is like, for me, like in the startup ecosystem, I'm just like, oh, that was, definitely one of the top programs. Just me being in programming,
Yeah.
especially not entrepreneurs. I saw when you launched it, I was like, this is dope. This is very
Uh,
well needed, and
yes. Thank you.
yeah. And
Thank
so basically, what sparked that vision to start
you.
Founder Gym
I think
instead of going like, continuing down like that VC
For
path?
sure, for sure. So why I left venture capital and went back
Yeah.
in, because it would have been easy for me to stay in venture capital, even transition to be a venture capitalist. And I did. And so why did I come back out? I think some of the reasons are personal, some are professional. And I really think that entrepreneurship is a very personal decision. Nobody can understand what it's like to build something from scratch, to literally make whatever is between your two ears come out into the world, that other people can see it and experience it, touch it, feel it, use it, benefit from it. It's the hardest thing I've ever done. And it's also the most fulfilling thing and most empowering thing I've ever done. So
Mhm.
why I did it, where I was in my life at that time, and even when I took the job at Cape Work Capital, I had told them I'm an entrepreneur and I'm going to go back out there. So there was already an agreement that this was going to be a season, not a forever of my life. And so they had that understanding. That was important. I also ended up going because I ended up entering entrepreneurship again because I had just gotten married.
Mhm.
And before I really had a big, I don't want to call it identity crisis, but just like a reckoning of like, oh my gosh, my life is no longer about just me and what I
Mhm.
want to do. Like it's we now.
Right.
And
Yeah.
it was a real like, woo, right? And so I think, me and my husband both had aspirations to start a family. And
Mhm.
then the we becomes bigger. It's not just us two, it's other people involved that you're responsible for. And I thought that time in my life, I was like, okay, here's a window where I want to take a crack at this again before I start investing in other parts of my life. So that
Mhm.
was the reason behind it. I think another reason was because I had realized I'm in rooms that other people are not in. I'm in rooms that other people don't even know about. And
Mhm.
it's like, I always have inside of me, and this is probably my upbringing, my name,
Mhm.
I always feel a responsibility to share it. That this is not about my personal ascent. This is not about my personal success. This is really about what am I doing here to share my privilege, to build bridges, to throw down ropes, help other people climb and benefit and go even farther than I ever could. That's
Right.
actually what lights me up and brings me joy. I do not find joy in me being successful alone. I do not find joy in that. I really find joy with trying to help other people close the gap between where they are and where they want to be.
Mhm.
And I just felt called. I felt called to do this now. And when I decided to do it, I said, if I'm going to do this, because the first time I did it with you guys didn't hear this part of the story. So remember that boyfriend who introduced me to, he was actually my first co-founder.
Oh, okay.
So
Yeah.
this was all, so that's a whole other episode
Right.
as well. So this time I was going out on my own, and I really wanted it to be me. I wanted my fingerprint on it. I wanted my ethos on it. I wanted my vision on it and my belief system on it. And I just was true to myself in every way. You know, I had grown up in this industry and seen so many programs come and go, especially programs for Black and Latinx founders, women founders, just come and go, the season, the flavor. And so I really wanted to try to build something that I felt could be quickly impactful and easily scalable. So that's why I doubled down on the virtual model. Like this was unheard of at the time. Everyone was doing things in person and in physical spaces, but I saw that as a huge limitation to who I would be able to help, because not everybody can uproot themselves and come out to a physical location for days, weeks, months. And I wanted to prove quickly that I can change people's lives. So my first cohort, and for those who don't know what Founder Gym was, we were an online training center for underrepresented founders, teaching them how to raise their first round of institutional capital. And my first experiment with my first cohort was 4 weeks. I said, and that was based off of it takes 21 days to build a new habit. And I said, it's not the reason people aren't raising money isn't because they can't, it's because they don't know how. Right. That's one factor. And the other factor is the bias, the conscious and unconscious bias of the people writing the checks. But let me see what I can do with fixing what people don't know, the unwritten rules of this game, the black box of VC. And I can build a curriculum. Why? Because I'm a teacher. Right. So where am I trying to get them to go? Let me back into that and build a curriculum week over week. Who do I know? So this is where I leverage my network. I was bringing in the who's who to come in and speak and have those experiences. Long story short, the first cohort was 4 weeks. I learned, I need a little bit more time. I need a little bit more time. So then I bumped it to 5 weeks, and then we landed on 6 weeks. 6 weeks was the sweet spot where they're learning enough and they can be immediately impactful. And so Founder Gym really was the most authentic culmination of my experience as a social activist, as an athlete, as a teacher, as an entrepreneur, and as an ecosystem leader, and bringing that all into one place, and a community builder. So we operated, I don't even know how many cohorts, 19 cohorts, I think. Over 600 founders, $130 million raised. 1 out of every 10 Black women to ever raise over $1 million is a graduate of Founder Gym. And we existed for about 4.5 years. And I'll pause there because I think I know what you can ask me next.
Thank you for listening. In just a moment, we'll be right back. Hey, welcome back to the Back to the Basics podcast. Let's jump right back into it. How did you know that you hit the nail on the head with Founder Gym? How did you know that this one was like, this is it?
Well, I think part of the it is your desire to keep working on it. Like, I think it's about, like, number one thing is, do you feel like waking up and working on this? Because there's nobody else here but you. If you don't show up, it doesn't get done. So I think the number one way to know if this is it is your desire to figure it out. Right? Like it's constantly evolving. The market's constantly changing, people's appetite. So Founder Gym was new at the time, but in 2022, it's not new anymore. See what I'm saying? So you constantly have to be evolving with the times. And so really a big part of the it factor beyond product market fit is founder fit. Right? Is this still something that lights you up, that you want to go to bat for it for years? Right? Because that's what's really going to take. I think more practically, how I knew I had product market fit is when the referrals, right? When you don't have to be such a salesperson anymore, when your customers become your best marketers. Right. And so that doesn't necessarily happen on accident. I really recommend everybody, if you have some sort of community or programming, anybody who's a user of your product, you should be intentionally turning them into your number one salespeople. It has to be on purpose. So there were strategic things we did to make it easy for our members to share their involvement. We made it very easy for them to share their involvement, shout to the rooftops how much they love it. They did all the selling for us. So that was another big strategy. I never paid $1 for paid advertisements, right? And so I'm not saying that's the best thing, right? Because we probably missed out on a lot, but at the time we had organic traffic, but also when you're doing something that's foreign to communities, venture capital is not well known in the Black community. It's not well known in the Latinx community. It's not well known in other communities that are historically underrepresented here. So you can't just sell, you have to teach. So what a big shift that we had to do, even when the referrals weren't working perfectly, is I would do free master classes. So these master classes, I would give away free value. It's kind of like try before you buy. So they can understand what is the founder gym experience before they commit to it. That's oftentimes needed when you're really trying to introduce something that's never been introduced in a community before.
Right. No, that's awesome. That's awesome. And then as far as like, I know this is a different business model than your first startup, but did you raise capital for Founder Gym?
I did not raise capital for Founder Gym. And this is an interesting thing. I don't know if I've ever talked about this in a public setting, but with Founder Gym at that time, when everybody knew I was leaving to start something new, I have a network now. Investors invest in founders. They invest in ideas, but they really invest in founders. And we can talk about and unpack that more. But there was a lot of people who were ready to invest in me. They said, okay, Mandela, I'm making a bet on you. Whatever you're doing, let's go. Right. And I did consider, originally I was building Founder Gym with the intention to raise capital, right? Make it a tech platform. And I think that as I got more and more clear on myself and really what I wanted at that time in my life, I didn't want it to be a venture-backed company. I wanted it to be a lifestyle business. And this is really important for people to make a decision about. When you take venture capital, you no longer just work for you. You have made an agreement, a partnership with other people who are giving you capital. And it's no longer just your business, it's our business, right? Because they gave you capital in exchange for ownership called equity. And why would someone do that? Well, let me tell you why someone would do that. It's a cheat code. When people invest in your company, it's not for free. They're getting something out of it. They get ownership, shares. But what it allows you to do is you have money to spend you didn't have otherwise. What do you do with that money? The number one thing you spend it on is people. So how many of you have a hard time building a team? Oftentimes, the number one reason I hear is I can't afford people. But guess what? VC does. It gives you money to afford people. And what can those people do? They can build product. They can ship programs. They can do all the things that scale your company. And guess what? They also do beyond the money. They give you mentorship. They connect you to other people who know how to do it, right? So that's why I personally, when I built Founder Gym, I didn't call it fundraising gym, because my original intention with Founder Gym was actually to build a full suite school. So we're going to start with fundraising, but I'm going to teach you customer thing. I'm going to teach you all these other things, right? Like kind of build out the layers of a high school, freshman, sophomore, right? But then also the subjects, math, science, history. But the reason I started with fundraising is because it is the biggest black box for most people. And it's the biggest cheat code to winning at business if you want to play that game. And I'm very clear with people that masterclass, this is what I teach. I'm not saying this is for you, right? So you really need to ask yourself, when you take venture capital, what you're signing yourself up for is a 10-year commitment, a 10-year commitment to build this business as big, as fast as possible. And the investor, am going to give you money to do that. I'm going to give you network to do that. I'm going to give you other resources to do that. But the agreement we're making, overarching, and this can be nuanced depending on the investor, but really how venture capital works is its speed and scale. How fast are you going and how big are you getting? Why is that the priority? Because the priority is to win as much of the market as possible, because that's how you make as much money as possible. This is capitalism.
Yeah, definitely. So I guess now to the question, the big question is, as far as running a business, running a lifestyle business that's doesn't have that excess capital kind of lean on. Closing the business down, I know it's rough for entrepreneurs. I've had to do it before. I mean, you had to do it before. I think people on this call have had to do it before. But tell us what ultimately went into the decision to just kind of like shut down Founders Gym. Like I said, I think it was literally a gym. Gym, not with the Y, but with the E for the startup ecosystem, especially for underrepresented founders. But tell us what made you come down to that decision to close that down and then move on to your
Yeah. the same way it started, it was the same way it ended. A very, very personal decision.
Mm,
When I started Founder Gym, I told you I was a newlywed wife, right? And I want to take a crack at it. Since starting Founder Gym, I became a mother of 2 children.
mm,
Right? I don't know if we have any parents on the line, but having children makes a difference in your life. And so that was one factor I considered of just the effort I was putting in and what other things are also important to me in my life.
mm,
Another thing I factored in was other opportunities that came my way. So you do good work, you attract new opportunities.
mm.
Success begets success,
Right.
right? So the more successful I got at Founder Gym, the more other people tried to recruit me. So I've
Mm,
been recruited ever since I started Founder Gym for other opportunities. So I also had a purview into what other ways on bigger stages I could be making an impact,
mhm,
right? So that's
mhm,
another factor into play. Another factor into play was the succession plan. The succession plan is what happens after you. Right. And so there was a succession plan in place. That succession plan ended up not working out.
mm,
So then I was faced with the decision of what do I do? And I decided that I felt I had done the very best I could, the very best I could, and that I wanted to go out on top. I wanted to go out knowing that we made an impact and that the Founder Gym brand meant something special, that
mm.
all of our 600 plus graduates around 6 continents and however many countries could forever feel pride in that brand,
Mm,
right? You all see Serena Williams going out right now. Serena Williams is a brand. She's
mm,
very conscientious on her exit strategy,
mm.
right? So that's another thing that I don't think a lot of founders consider is what's your exit strategy here?
Right.
Everyone's trying to start, but how is this going to end?
Mm,
Right. And so I think you should be strategic about how you want it to end and be thoughtful about it because it will always have consequences and not everybody's going to agree, but it's your life. And I think it's really important. I have deep, deep empathy for founders because nobody did the work you did. Right.
mhm,
So it doesn't matter what anyone else thinks.
mm.
Right?
That's good. And oh, I was gonna just add on to that, about I've seen founders kind of tie their personal identity with their actual startup. I remember when I had my first startup and it wasn't going as well. And I think one of my mentors or somebody said, like, hey, like, you know, every product has a life shelf. You know what I'm saying? Like you are the business, you're the one who creates these different things, right? And
Yeah.
in my head, I'm thinking like, no, but this is the thing I'm creating.
Mhm.
But like, it's like, no, like you poured it in that. So you can do that in other ways. So I guess
Mhm.
could you touch on that? Have you seen that as far as like within your experiences just working with so many founders of like how do you kind of still be passionate about it, but kind of separate like your personal, like I said,
Yes.
from your
Yes.
business?
Yes. So if nobody's told you yet, you are not your company. Your company is not you. It is a way in which your passion, your skill sets, your interest in this season of your life is manifesting. And you are an evolving being. You are an evolving being, right? And that's what I so much appreciate about what Serena's doing right now because she's normalizing it's okay to evolve. And I think that if nobody's told you that lately, it's okay for you to evolve too. And I think this is where you have to have a conversation with yourself around what are your non-negotiables. If you're going to do this and dedicate yourself to it, what must you get out of it? What must you get out of it may be in the terms of money. You may need to make a certain amount of money per day, per week, per month, per quarter, per year, right? What is the goal? Are you looking for clout? Are you looking to elevate your brand? There's nothing wrong with any of what I'm saying, but you have to name it. Otherwise, how do you know if you're satisfied, right? Is the carrot just keeps moving and you're never there yet, right? So really have a conversation with yourself if you haven't yet as to what you are trying to achieve, because you can then make a decision after and give yourself a time bound, right? You could say, I'm going to go all in, cut off all these people in my life, focus in for X amount of time, but I must hit this goal for me to know that it was worth it. that I got the right return on investment, right? And I don't think these are the conversations people are having enough. So what ends up happening is you get in this cycle and you think that it's way bigger than it is, and you're not grounded in seeing it as a means to an end. And what you don't allow yourself to do is what so many of the white male entrepreneurs are good at, which is what they're good at is seeing it as a season. So we have Elon has his first company, his second company, his third company, his fourth company, right? There's nothing wrong with thinking about it like that. You can decide, I really want to be a one company founder and go all in, and this is it for the rest of my life. Or you cannot. You could say, I'm doing this for this reasons. I'm trying to get this much money. I'm trying to build this type of network. I'm trying to learn these skill sets. I'm trying to make this impact. Be clear with yourself. So you're not just chasing a forever changing dream. And also know it's going to change as new levels of success bring out new sides of you. What I aspire today is different from what I aspired to when I started in 2012. Right. And it was different than when I aspired to when I did Founder Gym, because I have those things under my belt now. Right. So don't also get stunted because you don't have your whole life figured out in every decade. I'm not telling you to get paralyzed by that, but I am telling you the season of your life right now, what are you trying to achieve? Be clear with yourself.
Thank you for listening. In just a moment, we'll be right back. Hey, welcome back to the Back to the Basics podcast. Let's jump right back into it.
No, that's awesome. That's really good. I'm glad that you touched on that. And yeah, like I said, just so from Founders Gym, you made that, I said hard decision to move forward. However, you've joined, saying all raised.
Yeah.
And you're the CEO there, and you're still, leveraging that same impact and impacting so many founders and funders and just people that are in the technology landscape. So what drew you to All Raise?
That's such a good question, right? When you, I think everyone should know at all times you have options. Whether or not you may feel that way, please know you have options and really make sure you know your worth, and that you don't have to be stuck with what you think. All Raise. So All Raise, what I feel so passionate about All Raise is because it has had the ability to convene, attract some of the people in the industry who currently hold the power and the purse strings to make a difference. And that's exciting to me, because what did I tell you my skill set from teaching is? Sales, right? So if you have the resources that other people don't have, it's my job to sell you on starting to share those resources, starting to spread them out, make this place more equitable, more diverse, more inclusive. So that was one element that All Raise really has that I'm so excited about, because it's people who in some cases have played this game and played it well and really do want to make a difference for themselves and for other. All Raise is right now focused on women and non-binary leaders. And this includes Black women, Latinx women, differently abled women, all the spectrums of diversity, as well as non-binary leaders. And like you said, Justin, we're focused on investors, we're focused on founders, and we're focused on operators. So when you think about my journey of being a founder, right, then helping founders, both at K4 Capital and at Founder Gym, this is a new evolution of my impact, that I'm going beyond founders now to also the investor side as well as the operator side, because it's the whole ecosystem that works together and that I'm trying to disrupt and make sure it's more equitable. And so I'm really excited by the potential here, what's currently been accomplished here, but also changing things. And that's why they brought me in, to really help usher in a new chapter for this organization and make sure that, remember I said, when people see your brand, what does it mean to them? Do they feel like they belong here, right? And I really want this to be a place of belonging and inspiration, empowerment for more people. And I'm very confident it will be transformed into that.
Right. I love that because, at the beginning of our program at Square One, we tell our founders to fill out this worksheet. It's called the Finding Your Why worksheet, right?
Oh,
And it's really just about knowing why you're doing what you're doing. Like, why did you start this thing, right? It's because, I think that, your passion for something, what I'm saying, and turn that, what was it? I think my mentor told me your product can change, but as long as like your purpose, it can stay
mm,
the same. Like that personal mission,
yeah,
can stay the same, but the delivery, the medium can be different.
yeah.
It can be you doing a company, or it can be you working for a company, or it could be CEO at a company, but it could be a nonprofit, it could be for profit. But regardless, if you know that your personal mission, what you're trying to accomplish, like you said before, then it doesn't really matter what the delivery of it is, like as long as you
And be open, right? Like
right,
in
yeah.
transparency, I didn't plan for this. Like I
Mhm.
haven't planned for it. That's why I say, when I charge you all to be clear on what you want, I didn't say design exactly how it's going to look,
Mm.
right? But
Right.
be clear on what you want, because unless you're clear on it, you won't be able to spot it when it arrives, right?
Mm.
And so for me, even with All Raise, it wasn't just like with demo lesson, just like with Startup Weekend, K4 Capital Founder Gym. I didn't have this 10-year plan to do this and then do this and then I am being pulled because I'm so grounded in who I am and what I'm here to do, and I'm consistent. And
Mm.
so when people are looking for what I have to give, they know who to come to. See
Right.
what I'm saying? There's a consistency there. And so with All Raise and what the amazing foundation it's built, right? And also what I stand for and what I've built, partnered together, it can create something really magical.
Right. That's awesome. Could you give our first time founders like any advice on how to approach, venture capital when it's like when's the right time to raise and start raising capital? Um, and yeah, how to approach like your fundraising journey. You like
For sure.
when
For
should
sure.
you start it and how to approach it?
Got it. So how did this, so I would say, how did you decide? The number one question I get is, should I raise? And should I raise? And the second most popular question is, how do I raise? The should you raise question really is about what I had said earlier is, what are you trying to build? Are you trying to build a pizza shop? Are you trying to build DoorDash? Are you trying to build a t-shirt company, or are you trying to build Etsy?
Mm.
Right? Are you trying to build a gym? Or are you trying to build ClassPass?
Mm.
Right? So I think this is the core question that you have to ask yourself is, what are you trying to build? And really, venture capital comes into play to capitalize companies that have a tech infrastructure. That was the theme, right? Across the examples I gave. Why tech? Because tech scales. That's how we're communicating right now, right? You're on the other side of the country, right? We're on Zoom, a venture-backed company, using this to communicate. So I think it's really about how big you want to go. And remember, the speed aspect is another thing. Are you trying to go big within 10 years? Right?
Mm.
Because that's kind of the appetite that venture capitalists are interested in working with you until you have an exit. An exit is a liquidity event. Either you sell to another company, like who does Slack sell to? Did Slack sell to Microsoft? I can't remember.
Microsoft, I believe.
Was it Microsoft?
Microsoft, yeah.
My friend works here. I can't keep up with these companies. So Slack sold to Microsoft,
Mhm.
and that's an example of an exit. But Slack actually IPO'd first. So that was the unique situation. But IPO is when you go public on the stock market, right? And the public can buy shares of your company. It's no longer a private company, but these are the two desired outcomes when you're a venture-backed company, because all of those people along the way, founders, early employees, investors who own shares, equity in your company, this is how they get paid, is
Oh,
via the liquidity events. So really getting clear in yourself, what are you trying to build and how fast are you trying to build it? If you decide that you want to raise venture capital because you want to go big, you want to go fast, right? Great. The first thing to do to know when to do it is to get clear on how much money you need and what you're going to do with that money.
mm.
Right? So you want to raise it. Well, how much and what are you going to do with it? You may say, okay, I want 1 million. All right, why? What are you going to do with that 1 million? Right?
Mm.
This is a game of explanation. This is a game of storytelling, right? What the story that you're telling at the very beginning is a vision. There's nothing, right? You might have a prototype or you may have nothing, and you're trying to raise off of it. So really it's about your ability to storytell, your ability to get data in the market, get data from competitors, get data from history, lean into your expertise and tell a story via a pitch deck, which is about a 10-slide PowerPoint, Google Slides, whatever it may be, that conveys to an investor, I'm raising $1 million and this is what I'm going to do with $1 million, right? Because once you raise, the intention is that you're going to raise more and more money. You're going to continue to put capital into your business. Now, you don't always have to. Some people raise money early on and decide to not raise again. But most companies in the traditional way, which is, I'm not saying is the right way, I'm just saying is the traditional storied way of doing this, is you raise your first round, which may be a pre-seed or seed, $1 million or less. And then you go to a Series A, Series B, Series C, and beyond. And you continue to raise capital every 1 to 2 years. And this becomes a cycle because what does the capital do? You're using money that your business didn't earn to hire people, to build new products, expand into new markets, right? It's a cheat code to beat your competitors.
Awesome. No, that's awesome. And then as far as how to like the first things founders should do when preparing for VC. So like say, I guess like, what would you say that they need to do to prepare to go on the venture capital route? So say if people say, hey, I want to go big, I want to go take this route of venture capital.
I think the first thing you should do is go talk to other founders who've done it. I think that's really, really important that you're not trying, like if you're trying to play a new sport, right? You wouldn't just wing it. You'd probably like watch a YouTube video or, ask someone to help you who's done it. So I think oftentimes one of the biggest mistakes people make is they try to figure it out by themselves when there's a lot of knowledge and interest to help you from other people, but you have to make yourself vulnerable. And this is one of the things that I got wrong early on is that I don't know if it was pride or if it was insecurity or a little bit of both, but I really put on an air that I knew what I was doing when I had no idea what the fuck I was doing. Excuse my language. And I didn't, but I never told anybody. And so I just suffered in silence. And I see this happening all the time with founders of color, women, where we are one of a few and only used to like having to have it all together. And that's not how you're going to succeed here. And so I just really welcome everybody to be like, all because you're vulnerable and honest about what you know and you don't know, doesn't mean you're not credible, right, to do it. And I think the reason I know this so well is working at a venture capital firm and seeing all these white and Asian men come in who don't know what the hell they're doing and just do it and figure it out and be honest about it. I'm like, wait a second, you guys are playing a totally different game than the one I'm playing. Right. So there's this balance of entrepreneurship. The best entrepreneurs are like super ambitious and confident, but incredibly humble and self-aware.
Yeah, I was going to say like, so, I used to work for a venture capital firm as well. And it was definitely like to your point about just like I said, white Asian male, like it comes off like confidence and having conviction. Yep. So I think that like those two things, like if you have confidence in what you're working on and you have that conviction that you are going to do a bit like that. And to your point about telling the story, like those things come off as like, okay, this is an opportunity here. Like regardless if you have the product or you have customers, that confidence and having conviction and just that undenying conviction, investors love that. I know venture capitalists love it.
Yeah. And you'll see this. I'm sure you all have been watching all of these crash and burn documentaries about these startup founders, Adam Newman, Elizabeth Holmes, Anna DuVernay, right? Watch the actresses and actors of these things. These people are incredibly confident. They're narcissistic oftentimes. They're out of their mind. But part of, again, the thing that you are identifying, Justin, is the importance of confidence. If you don't believe in yourself and your belief in yourself is not believable, no one's going to back you. No one's going to want to be on your team. So part of this is the inner work you have to do to really believe in yourself.
Awesome. Cool. All right. So we'll turn over to the chat. And and see if we have any questions. So, do you find that more venture capital firms are leaning into social responsibility and donating their carry? For
Mm,
example, Andreessen Cultural Leadership Fund.
yeah. Yeah, I know Chris Lyons over there. He's a good friend. I think, do I notice a pattern? I don't notice a pattern or a trend, no, but that doesn't mean that change, it's not happening on individual levels, but I haven't seen like a sweeping change across the industry where people who are in positions of power and a lot of money, assets under management called AUM, are thinking creatively about how to distribute the profits of their earnings. I think there are different, so what oftentimes happens where I have seen creative approaches is at the firm level where historically the partners, which are the highest level, the GPs, the partners, have something called carry, which is ownership in each of the companies that they invest in. And they oftentimes keep all of that money. That's the historic traditional approach of venture capital. Where I see that changing is there's different distributions of carry now going to other people, maybe more junior investors or even platform teams or portfolio members like I played at K4 Capital. So they're kind of sharing the profits, not just with the partners, but with other members of the venture firm. So that's what I've seen more frequently, but that usually isn't publicized.
Awesome. Cool. So I'll go to the next question. Anytime you started a company as a sole owner, did you speak in first or second person? If you did speak in first person, did you use I or we?
If I'm a solo founder, I think what
Yeah,
I
or
hear,
I guess the question
solo
is,
founder,
have you
if I'm
started a
talking
company
about founder, Jim, do I say I or do I say we? I think, well, it depends on the context. So I don't want to give a blanket statement, but I would say I would recommend saying we as if you really have a team. And a team, when you're just starting, doesn't always have to be people who are full time. Your team may be volunteers. Your team may be hourly contractors. That's still your team. And I think that when you represent a we that is true to the reality, like I don't want you to just make stuff up, but if it's grounded in some semblance of reality of your situation, I think that's very powerful because oftentimes what investors or anybody looks for is your ability to attract talent. This is another thing people don't talk about is that when they're sizing you up, they're asking themselves, do I believe in this idea? Do I believe it will be as big as they say it will be? But do I believe this person can attract the talent that they're going to need to grow this?
Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
So what was the biggest mistake you made as a founder that
Mm-hmm.
you would recommend that first time founders should avoid? Because I know we work with a lot of first time founders. I think one of our founders had like it was a fake VC tried to email them with some mysterious name or fund, and I was like, let me see that fund. I'm like, that's like spam. So,
Yeah.
but that's one example. But what would you say, just in your experience? It doesn't have to be as a founder, but just I guess within your career.
Great question, Justin. I think one of them I talked about already, which was my lack of vulnerability and being honest that I don't know what I'm doing and I need help, and that it's not going to discount what I do know. But I do think the responsibility is also on the other side of the table. And I had investors where I also put the onus on them that you are a white man in this space that is it's dominated by white men. And so imagine what it can feel like to be me, to be someone else who is not you entering this space where they may not feel safe. So what can you do to make me feel more safe, to be vulnerable, to be real? Right. So I think part of it is on me, but part of it's on them too, because they create the environment and they have the power in the dynamic of me trying to get their capital. Right. So I want everybody to really be inspired to be more vulnerable, but also to recognize the environment you're walking into and put the onus on them to create more welcoming spaces as well. Now, my new answer of what I wish I would have done differently or the mistake I made A mistake I made, that bled into not just the VC relationship, but my team relationship, and not like getting help I needed on my team because I was doing it all. So I oftentimes tell people, get people on your team. And oftentimes what I hear is, I don't like working with other people. I've been burned in the past, right? But it's not building a team is a fast way to burn out or to burn your business down to the ground. You have to, if you're going to build a business at scale, you have to get skilled at being a people leader. And if you don't enjoy that, right, you need to get a Sheryl Sandberg. You need to be Mark Zuckerberg, and you need to get a Sheryl who will like engaging with your people. So my answer is so many mistakes. I'm just thinking. It's not that I don't have mistakes. I'm just thinking about the ones that'll be.
No, you shared a good one. I think about.
Yeah, I'm trying it. There is something on the tip of my tongue. What did I want to share? I said asking for help. There was something, but I can't. I think losing touch of your customers. I think if you ever want to figure out like what you should be doing next, you need to not be talking between your two ears or in your team room or to your investors. Go talk to your customers. I think we lose track of that as we get bigger. We forget like who we're serving and who at the end of the day is going to have the say and if this works or not.
That's good. That's good, because I think that a lot of founders, especially first-time founders, like, hey, I have an idea, and go straight to like venture capital, and then figuring out like, hey, like, you're building a business, and then the business is you're building it for somebody, and that somebody is your customers, and that's kind of what we preach. Saying that square one is just like focus on your customers, get those first paying customers to kind of validate that idea and that concept, and then use that as leverage when it's time to start raising capital. Well, thank you so much, Mandela. We really appreciate it. For, like I said, everybody, go to squareoneschool.com, like I said, to learn more. So awesome. Thank you, Mandela.
Justin. All right. I appreciate you all. Thank you for your time.
All right. Have a good day, and talk to you all soon. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Back to the Basics. Make sure you share this episode with somebody that's starting their entrepreneurial journey, and we'll see you in the next episode.